The deadly calm. The stars in the vast emptiness of space shone brightly, but there was a feeling of unease that hung in the air. The crew of the alien ship had received a distress signal, and it led them to an unknown location on the edge of the galaxy. They were used to danger, but this was different. Something felt wrong. Their mission was to help, but little did they know, they were heading straight into the heart of a trap. The message they had received was simple, but chilling. A human warship, stranded and alone, sending out a call for assistance. It was strange that a human ship would be in this part of space, and the crew of the alien ship could not help but wonder if there was more to the story. Captain Zorak, the leader of the alien ship, stood in front of the command center, his eyes scanning the stars. He was known for his sharp mind and tactical brilliance. He trusted his instincts, and right now, his instincts were telling him that something was not right. His crew was preparing to rescue the human crew, but Zorak felt a growing sense of dread. "Are we sure about this?" Zorak asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. "We have no choice, sir," replied Lieutenant Kira, his second in command. "The distress signal is coming from that location. We need to help." Zorak didn't respond right away. He stared at the coordinates on the screen, his brow furrowing. He had never been one to shy away from danger, but this time, he felt something deeper, something sinister. The ship they were approaching was silent, and that silence only made the situation more unnerving. "Prepare the crew," Zorak ordered finally, his voice steady. "We will not turn back now." The crew moved quickly, getting ready for whatever lay ahead. As the alien ship drifted closer to the coordinates, Zorak noticed how still the space around them was. It was as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. No ships in sight, no signs of life, just the cold emptiness of space and the haunting sound of their ship's engines hum. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The silence was thick, heavy. The alien ship inched closer to the location, but still, there was no sign of the human warship. The crew began to grow restless. They knew something was off, but they didn't dare voice their concerns. They followed orders, and right now, their orders were to rescue the humans who had sent the distress signal. Then suddenly, the communication system beeped to life. The voice that came through was not what anyone expected. It was calm, yet full of confidence, a voice that seemed to know more than it should. "This is Captain Grayson of the Fortune's Fury. If you've come for help, you've made a mistake." The message was short, but it sent chills through the crew. They had expected a cry for help, a voice filled with fear. Instead, they heard a voice that was so calm, so sure, that it sent a ripple of unease through the crew. There was something about the tone that made them question everything. "Did he just say, a mistake?" Lieutenant Kira asked, her voice barely a whisper. Zorak clenched his fists. This was not what he had anticipated. A human warship with such confidence. It didn't make sense. The crew of the alien ship had heard stories of human resilience, but this was different. Something was off. "We are here to assist," Zorak replied into the communication system, trying to keep his voice steady. "Please confirm your location. We will send a rescue team." There was a long pause on the other end. And then, the voice of Captain Grayson came through again. "You're already too close," he said, his tone a strange mix of amusement and warning. "And you've already made your first mistake." The crew exchanged nervous glances. What did he mean by that? They hadn't done anything yet. They were just following orders. Suddenly, the communication system went dead. Silence returned, but this time, it felt different. It was as though the calm before the storm had finally broken. "Sir," Lieutenant Kira said, her voice trembling, "we have visual on the human ship. It's massive. It's not like anything we've seen before." Zorak's heart sank as he turned to look at the view screen. There, floating in the distance, was the Fortune's Fury. It was enormous, dark, and imposing. Its sleek design seemed to blend into the blackness of space, making it hard to spot at first. But now it was clear. The ship was massive, and it was staring right at them. "We need to move quickly," Zorak said, his voice firm. "Prepare for any potential threats." But just as he gave the order, something unexpected happened. The human ship moved, slowly at first, then faster, coming straight toward them. "Shields up," Zorak shouted. The alien ship's shields flickered to life, but Zorak knew it wouldn't be enough. He had no idea what this human ship was capable of, but he knew it was too late to turn back now. The tension in the air grew as the two ships came closer and closer. There was no turning back. The crew of the alien ship had walked straight into the unknown, and they had no idea what horrors they were about to face. The two ships slowly closed the distance between them. The Fortune's Fury loomed large in the viewscreen of the alien vessel, its dark shape giving off an eerie, almost menacing aura. The crew of the alien ship stood frozen in silence, watching in awe and growing fear as the human warship moved with an unsettling precision. Captain Zorak stood at the command center, his mind racing. He had faced many challenges in his time as a commander, but nothing like this. There was something about the human warship that felt wrong. It wasn't just its size or its design, which was unlike any ship Zorak had ever encountered. It was the way it moved, the way it seemed to know exactly where to be at every moment. It was as though the ship itself had a mind of its own. "Sir, we're receiving another message," Lieutenant Kira said, her voice tight with nervousness. Zorak nodded, stepping forward to the communication console. "Patch it through," he ordered. The voice of Captain Grayson crackled through the speakers once again. This time, however, there was a new undertone, one that was darker, colder, more threatening. "You shouldn't have come here," Grayson's voice said, steady and calm. "This is your last warning. Leave now or face the consequences." The crew of the alien ship exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. Zorak, however, was not a leader who backed down easily. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it quickly. "This is not a request," Zorak said, his voice firm and authoritative. "We are here to offer assistance. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness." There was a brief pause before Captain Grayson's voice returned, but this time it was filled with a quiet, unsettling amusement. "Kindness. You've already made your first mistake by thinking you can offer help. And now you've made your second mistake, underestimating what you're up against." Zorak's eyes narrowed. It was clear now. This was no ordinary human warship. There was something about it that was far more dangerous than he had anticipated. He could sense the tension in the air, the uncertainty spreading through his crew. "Prepare to defend the ship," Zorak ordered, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "We don't know what we're up against, but we'll be ready for anything." The crew moved swiftly, their training kicking in as they activated the ship's weapons systems and prepared for whatever would come next. Zorak stood at the center of it all, his mind focused but his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. He had faced threats before, but this felt different. This human ship wasn't just a threat. It was a force to be reckoned with. Suddenly, the Fortune's Fury made a move. It wasn't charging at them or launching weapons. It simply changed course, slowly and deliberately, as if toying with them. The alien ship's sensors were on high alert, but there was no sign of any offensive action. It was as if the human warship was biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "What are they doing?" Kira muttered, her fingers hovering over the controls. "They're moving closer, but they're not attacking." Zorak watched the ship closely. There was no sign of an immediate threat, but the silence and the deliberate movements of the Fortune's Fury made him uneasy. This was no ordinary situation. The human captain was playing some kind of game, and Zorak wasn't sure what the rules were. Without warning, a blinding flash of light erupted from the Fortune's Fury, followed by a deafening hum. The alien ship's shields flared to life as the energy blast slammed into them, causing the entire ship to shudder violently. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to maintain control. Zorek's heart raced, but his mind remained clear. This was it, the attack he had been anticipating. "Shields holding, but barely," Kira shouted. "We're taking damage." Zorek's grip tightened around the control panel. The human ship had not only fired on them, but the blast had been far more powerful than he expected. It was clear now that this warship wasn't just an ordinary vessel. It was something far more dangerous. "We need to return fire," Zorek said, his voice cold and calculating. "Target their main weapon systems. Take them out before they can do more damage." The alien crew began to retaliate, launching energy blasts in the direction of the Fortune's Fury. But to Zorek's shock, the human warship's shields flared to life, absorbing the energy without even a visible effect. The human ship didn't even flinch. "This is impossible," Kira whispered. "Their shields are stronger than ours." Zorek didn't respond. He was too focused on the situation at hand. He knew they were facing a challenge unlike any they had encountered before. The human ship was more powerful, more resilient, and far more prepared than he had ever imagined. Just as the alien ship prepared for another round of attacks, Captain Grayson's voice came through the communication system once again. "You should have left when you had the chance," Grayson said, his voice dripping with confidence. "Now you'll see why we're not to be underestimated." The crew of the alien ship braced themselves for what was coming next. Zorek could feel the weight of the moment settling in. The real fight was about to begin, and they had no idea what kind of nightmare they were about to face. The Fortune's Fury was no longer just a ship. It was a predator, and they were its prey. The tension aboard the alien ship reached unbearable levels as the Fortune's Fury loomed just beyond their reach, its guns silent for the moment. Zorek, still standing at the command center, could feel the pressure building. He had never faced anything like this before. The human warship wasn't like any other enemy he had encountered in his long career. It was unnervingly calm, but there was an ominous energy in the air. His crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to keep the ship intact. Alarms still blared from the earlier energy blast, but Zorek knew they couldn't afford to lose focus. One mistake could mean the end of everything. "We're being locked on," Lieutenant Kira said, her voice tense, her fingers rapidly tapping the control panel. "The Fortune's Fury has targeted our propulsion system." Zorek's heart skipped a beat. The enemy ship was preparing to disable them completely. The Fortune's Fury hadn't fired again, but Zorek knew it was only a matter of time before they did. It was impossible to predict what the humans would do next. One thing was clear: they were playing a different kind of game, one that Zorek didn't fully understand. "Can we outmaneuver them?" Zorek asked, turning to his navigator. "We can try," the navigator replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "But their targeting system is too accurate. We won't last long if they continue to focus on our engines." Zorek clenched his jaw. The Fortune's Fury wasn't like anything they had ever faced before. It was clearly a highly advanced vessel, and its crew, led by Captain Grayson, was far more strategic than Zorek had initially assumed. The aliens had only attacked to defend themselves, but now they were on the back foot. "Captain," Kira interrupted his thoughts, "the enemy is hailing us again." "Patch it through," Zorek ordered, his voice grim. The comm screen flickered to life, and once again Captain Grayson's cold, measured voice came through the speakers. "I told you, you should have left," Grayson said. There was no threat in his words, just a quiet certainty that sent a chill down Zorek's spine. "But now, you've made a mistake you can't undo." Zorek's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. Grayson's voice was calm, but the meaning behind his words was anything but. This was no ordinary fight. The human warship had proven itself capable of crippling them with just one shot. And yet, they were holding back. It was almost as if the humans were testing them, letting them see just how much they could handle before deciding to end it all. "What do you want?" Zorek spat, his patience thinning. "We're not going anywhere. We've come to offer our help." If you refuse, we'll be forced to act. Grayson's response was a chuckle, soft but laced with confidence. Help. Your help is no good here. I've seen your kind before. Weak, full of empty threats. But what you don't understand is that you're dealing with something far beyond your understanding. This ship isn't just a warship. It's something much, much more. The words sent a shockwave through Zorek's mind. It was clear now. Grayson wasn't just talking about firepower. This ship held something far more dangerous, something that made it more than just a weapon of war. Zorek's thoughts raced. He had to act quickly. Every moment they wasted allowed the humans to gain more ground, more control. They couldn't afford to stand idly by while the Fortune's fury continued to circle them like a predator. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Zorek ordered. All shields at full power. We'll make them regret underestimating us. But as the crew scrambled to execute his commands, the Fortune's fury made its move. Without warning, the human warship fired again. This time, it wasn't a single shot. It was a barrage. Energy blasts streaked through space, hitting the alien ship with precision and force. Their shields flared to life, but even as the energy deflected off the shields, the impact caused the ship to shake violently. The force of the blasts felt as though they were coming from all directions, disorienting the crew. Shields are failing. Kira shouted, her hands flying over the controls as she desperately tried to maintain their defense. We won't last much longer at this rate. Zorek's mind raced. There was no way they could keep this up. The human warship had far more firepower than they had ever anticipated. And with every attack, it became more and more obvious that their shields were not going to be enough. But it wasn't just the power of the attacks that Zorek found unsettling. It was the ease with which the humans launched them. The Fortune's fury didn't seem to be struggling. It wasn't even trying to destroy them. It was simply wearing them down, step by step. Grayson wasn't trying to win this fight outright. He was trying to break them. This is not just a battle, Zorek muttered to himself. It's a lesson. As the next volley of blasts approached, Zorek ordered a retreat. They needed to regroup to come up with a new plan. But as the ship began to turn, another voice rang through the comms, interrupting his thoughts. You can't escape, Grayson's voice said, now more menacing than before. The moment you stepped into my territory, you sealed your fate. You've seen what I can do. Now, it's time to see what you can do. Zorek's heart sank. He knew they were in deeper trouble than he had ever imagined. The Fortune's fury wasn't just a ship. It was a weapon, a tool for something far darker than he had anticipated. And they were already losing the fight. Zorek's eyes narrowed as the Fortune's fury continued its unyielding assault. The alien ship rocked again under the force of another blast, and the lights flickered. He could hear the frantic shouts of his crew over the comms, each one trying to keep their station intact, but the situation was spiraling out of control. The human warship, with its ruthless precision, showed no sign of stopping. Every move they made seemed calculated, every strike intentional. Report, Zorek barked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing sense of dread gnawing at him. Shields down to 30%, Captain. Kira reported, her voice tight with fear. If we don't make a move now, we won't have enough left to repel the next hit. Zorek's heart raced. His crew was strong, capable, but nothing they had prepared for could match the power of the Fortune's fury. This wasn't just a battle of ships. This was a war of wills. And right now, the humans were winning. They're toying with us, Zorek muttered to himself, his thoughts racing. He had been in countless battles, faced enemy fleets that outnumbered his own, and always found a way to survive. But this was different. The Fortune's fury wasn't just a ship. It was a living nightmare. Its captain, Grayson, was no ordinary commander. There was something in his voice, in the way he spoke, that told Zorek this wasn't just about winning. It was personal. Captain, we can't keep this up, Kira said urgently, her hands flying over the controls. They've disabled our engines. We're dead in space, unless we act now. Zorek's mind churned as he scanned the tactical readouts on his screen. They were trapped. The human ship had cut off every escape route, and their own ship was nearly crippled. But something about the way Grayson had spoken, pushed Zorek into action. He refused to believe that this was the end. He slammed his fist on the console. "We're not done yet," he growled. "Prepare the last-ditch offensive. Target their weapon systems. We may not win, but we'll make them feel our wrath." Kira hesitated, a look of disbelief crossing her face. "Captain, their shields are far too strong. We're not going to break through them with the firepower we have left." "I don't care," Zorek snapped, his voice sharp. "We fight until the end. Every crew member on this ship deserves that." The crew worked quickly, adjusting their remaining weapon systems. It was a desperate measure, a last stand against an opponent that seemed unbeatable. But Zorek had seen the worst of what the galaxy had to offer. He had fought wars for decades, and he wasn't about to give up now. Meanwhile, Captain Grayson's voice crackled over the comms again, calm and calculating. "You're a brave bunch, I'll give you that. But bravery won't save you. You're outmatched and outclassed. I don't think you understand what you're dealing with here. This ship, it's not just a weapon. It's a force of nature." Zorek's teeth gritted together. Grayson's arrogance was infuriating. He had to remind himself that the human captain wasn't just taunting them. He was trying to break them psychologically, to destroy their resolve before the final blow. The Fortune's fury wasn't just using firepower, it was using fear. But Zorek wasn't afraid. Not yet. And he wasn't about to let his crew die without a fight. Firing weapons. Kira shouted as the last of their remaining energy was channeled into their guns. The ship shuddered as the weapon systems powered up, and a stream of laser fire shot toward the human warship. It wasn't much, but it was something. But Grayson's ship didn't even flinch. The blast was absorbed by the Fortune's Fury shields with ease, as if the energy had been nothing more than a slight annoyance. Zorak watched helplessly as the human warship retaliated. It was as if they weren't even trying to kill them. Not yet. They were simply dismantling them piece by piece. "Shields are down," Kira cried out. "We're exposed." Zorak stared at the empty space on his screen, his mind racing. There was only one thing left to do. And it was risky. So risky, it could cost them everything. But if he didn't act now, the ship and crew would be lost anyway. "Prepare for a direct assault," Zorak ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of the decision. "We're going in close. We're going to ram them." There was a long, stunned silence among the crew. They had heard of desperate tactics in war, last-minute, all-or-nothing attacks that defied logic. But this was something else entirely. "Captain, you're insane," Kira exclaimed. "We'll never survive a collision with that ship, not even close. I'd rather die fighting than give up, and let them finish us off like cattle," Zorak said coldly, staring at the screen as the Fortune's fury loomed closer. "This is it. Everyone, brace yourselves." The crew scrambled to prepare, but deep down, Zorak knew that their chances of survival were almost zero. He didn't care. He would go down fighting, and he would make sure the humans knew that they had faced a worthy opponent. As the distance between the two ships closed, Zorak felt a strange calm wash over him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about his crew, his people. He wasn't going to let them die without doing everything in his power to stop the human captain from getting away with this. The Fortune's fury drew closer, and Zorak could feel the weight of the decision on his shoulders. There was no turning back now. Whatever happened next would decide their fate, and the human captain would soon learn that Zorak would never surrender. Not ever. The Fortune's fury loomed large in front of them, its massive frame casting an almost oppressive shadow. Zorak could feel the cold sweat on his brow as he held his breath, waiting for the right moment to execute his desperate plan. His fingers hovered over the controls, ready to give the final command. The crew of the Destiny's Fury knew what was coming. There was no point in hiding the truth now. They were about to make the most daring move they'd ever attempted, a move that could either save them or obliterate them in an instant. Zorek's voice cut through the tension in the control room. "Prepare to engage. Full throttle." Kira hesitated, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, this is suicide." "I know," Zorek answered, his voice low but resolute. "But if we're going to die, we die fighting. We will make sure that the Fortune's fury remembers what it faced today." He could see her nod in grim acceptance. There was no other choice. If they didn't act now, they would all be dead soon enough. The human warship had already dismantled their defenses, and they had little left to defend themselves with. It was all or nothing. The last of their remaining fuel was being drained into the engines as they surged forward. Zorek's heart raced, the sound of his pulse thundering in his ears. They were closing the gap now, the massive guns of the Fortune's fury lining up for one final strike. But Zorek wasn't about to let that happen. He knew that if they allowed the Fortune's fury to strike first, they would never get close enough to do any real damage. "Fire everything we've got," he barked. The ship shuddered as its remaining weapon systems unleashed a barrage of desperate fire at the oncoming enemy. The Destiny's fury seemed to groan under the strain, its systems barely holding together. The shots were wild, scattered, and far less accurate than they should have been. But in the chaos, there was a small chance, a small hope, that some of their fire would break through the Fortune's fury shields. Kira's fingers flew over the console, attempting to get one more shot off before the Destiny's fury collided with the human ship. "Shields down to 10%, Captain. We're not going to make it." Zorek slammed his fist onto the armrest of his chair. "We will." The two ships drew closer. The Fortune's fury was still firing, its weapons cutting through the empty void of space with terrifying precision. But Zorek could see it, the flicker in the human ship's shields, a brief moment of vulnerability. He wasn't sure if it was a weakness or just a temporary malfunction, but it didn't matter. This was the chance they had to take. "We're almost there," Kira shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "Prepare for impact." There was a final deafening explosion as the Destiny's fury fired one last blast, a shot that grazed the human warship's outer hull. It wasn't enough to do real damage, but it was enough to send a shockwave of energy through the Fortune's fury, destabilizing its shields for a brief moment. Zorak didn't wait for another second. Brace for impact. The Destiny's fury rocketed forward, its speed unmatched as it plowed directly into the Fortune's fury side. The collision sent shockwaves through both ships. The force of the impact was so strong that Zorek felt his teeth rattle. The lights flickered and alarms blared. The whole ship groaned, and for a moment, Zorek thought it was over. But then, through the ringing in his ears and the chaos around him, he heard something. Something that made his heart race faster, not in fear, but in hope. The Fortune's fury had staggered. Its engines, now visibly damaged, had flickered. Its massive cannons had stopped firing. For the first time in this battle, the human warship seemed vulnerable. "Now," Zorek shouted, "take advantage of the breach. All power to forward weapons." The crew scrambled, working as quickly as they could to bring their remaining systems online. The Destiny's fury wasn't out of the fight yet, and Zorek wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. Kira's hands flew across the console. "Weapons are ready, Captain." Target locked. Fire. A blast of energy shot from the Destiny's fury, striking the damaged hull of the Fortune's fury. It was a glancing blow, but enough to send another jolt through the human warship. The Fortune's fury was still standing, but it was no longer the unstoppable force it had been. Now it was wounded. Now they had a chance. "Get us clear," Zorek ordered. The ship's engines groaned to life as they pulled back, allowing the Destiny's fury to put some distance between them and the Fortune's fury. But the human ship wasn't done. Through the crackling comms, Grayson's voice came through again, filled with quiet rage. "You'll regret this," he growled. "We're not finished." Not by a long shot. Zorek's jaw tightened. He knew the fight wasn't over. The human captain was a formidable opponent, but they had just proved that the Fortune's fury was not invincible. The battle was far from finished, but Zorek had something the humans didn't: hope. And with that hope, he would push forward, no matter what. Set course for the heart of their fleet, Zorek ordered. We're not done yet. This war isn't over, and we're going to make sure they know that. The crew nodded in grim determination. The Destiny's fury was wounded, its resources nearly depleted. But Zorek had never seen his crew more focused. They were no longer the hunted. They were the hunters. And they would make sure the galaxy would know their names. They were going to win. The Destiny's fury drifted in the void of space, its hull scarred from the brutal battle. The air in the control room was thick with tension. Zorak sat in his chair, staring at the flickering display in front of him. He had never felt so close to the edge, so close to the end. The Fortune's fury was still out there, and it wasn't backing down. The crew of the Destiny's fury was exhausted, battered, and running on empty. They had no more tricks left. "We're running low on fuel, Captain," Kira reported, her voice tight with worry. "And most of our weapons are offline. If we don't come up with something fast, we're finished." Zorak didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing, going over every possible option. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now. They had come this far. They had fought tooth and nail against the human warship, and they had made it this far by defying the odds. But now, with the enemy closing in and their resources depleted, it was time for the ultimate gamble. "Captain," said Soren, the ship's engineer, his voice strained. "There's a plan, but it's dangerous. We've got one shot at this, and if it fails, we're done." Zorek's gaze snapped toward Soren. "What is it?" Soren hesitated, clearly nervous. "We can overload the core of the Destiny's fury, detonate it. It'll send out a massive energy pulse. It won't destroy the Fortune's fury completely, but it'll knock out their weapons and shields for a short time, long enough for us to get in close and do some serious damage." The idea was reckless. It was the kind of plan that made men go mad, a last-ditch effort that usually ended in death. But Zorek didn't hesitate. His hand gripped the armrest of his chair, his mind made up. "How much time do we have?" Zorek asked, his voice steady. "Maybe 20 minutes, Soren replied. "If we can get the core to overload, the pulse will be enough to buy us a window of opportunity. But once it's done, we won't have a ship to fly. Then we'll make it count," Zorek said, his words sharp and firm. "I won't let their arrogance go unpunished." He turned to Kira. "Prepare the crew. Make sure everyone knows what's happening." Kira's face was pale, but she nodded. "Understood, Captain." The crew began to move quickly. The tension was palpable, but Zorek saw something in their eyes that he hadn't seen before: determination. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something more. They were fighting to remind the galaxy that they could not be ignored, that they wouldn't be erased. Zorek rose from his chair, making his way to the central command platform. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was their last chance, the final stand. He could only hope that his gamble would pay off. Meanwhile, on the Fortune's fury, Captain Grayson was reviewing the latest scan of the Destiny's fury. It was still drifting, but it wasn't entirely still. The human captain scowled. He knew Zorek. He knew the alien commander wouldn't just give up. The Destiny's fury had too much pride to simply be defeated. Grayson was aware that the Destiny's fury was limping. Its shields were down, and its engines were barely functioning. But he hadn't expected this. It wasn't over. "Captain," a voice said from behind him. It was his second in command. "They're not retreating. The Destiny's fury is powering up again. Should we prepare for another assault?" Grayson's eyes narrowed. "No. We'll let them come. I want to see what they're planning. We've dealt with their tricks before." He turned back to the tactical screen. There was something different about the way the Destiny's fury was moving. It was almost as if it were charging up for one final strike. Grayson's heart skipped a beat. It didn't matter how badly the Destiny's Fury had been damaged. If Zorak was still alive, there would always be one last surprise waiting for him. "Stay alert," Grayson ordered, his voice steady. "Prepare to engage on my command." Back on the Destiny's Fury, Zorak stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes locked onto the swirling chaos of space. It was quiet, eerily so. The crew was ready, bracing themselves for the next move. Zorak's heart was heavy, but his resolve was strong. They had no other choice. He couldn't let the Fortune's Fury leave here victorious. 20 minutes, Soren called out from the engineering station. "The core is unstable, but we're almost there. Once it's done, we'll have to move fast." Zorak gave a single nod. "We will." The countdown began. The ship's power flickered, the hum of the engine slowly beginning to sound more like a warning. The moment of truth was nearly upon them. Zorak took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the controls. His ship was dying, but he wasn't. Not yet. Not until this was finished. And then, as the minutes ticked down, the alarms went off. The Fortune's Fury was charging. Zorak's eyes locked on the display. He had expected this. The human captain was preparing to finish what he had started. It was time for the final clash. "Brace for impact," Zorak shouted, his voice resolute. The Destiny's Fury lurched forward, engines roaring as it sped directly toward the Fortune's Fury. This time, there would be no hesitation. This time, they would either win or they would die trying. The Destiny's Fury surged forward, its battered hull groaning under the strain. Zorak's hands tightened on the controls as he watched the distance between his ship and the Fortune's Fury close. It was a race against time. The overloaded core would only last so long before it either detonated or shut down. But Zorak wasn't afraid. He had faced death before, and now he welcomed it, if it meant striking back at those who had underestimated him and his crew. The Fortune's Fury loomed large in the distance, its weapons aimed directly at them. The human ship was ready, its captain no doubt waiting for the final blow. But Zorak wasn't about to let them have the last laugh. He had one final card to play, a gamble that might just change the course of the battle. 15 seconds. Soren called out from engineering. His voice was strained, but Zorak could hear the determination in it. He wasn't the only one willing to sacrifice everything. Zorak's mind raced. He knew this was their last chance. If they failed now, they would be consumed by the Fortune's Fury's firepower. But if they succeeded, they would show the galaxy that they were not to be taken lightly. "Lock all remaining weapons," Zorak commanded. "Aim for their main engines." The crew worked quickly, their actions synchronized with the urgency of the moment. The Destiny's Fury was running on fumes, but its weapons were still functional, albeit limited. The time was almost up, and the human warship was closing in fast. The countdown on the core reached single digits, and Zorak's heart pounded in his chest. With every second, he could feel the pressure mounting. This was it. This was the moment where everything would either fall apart or they would break through. 10 seconds, Soren said, his voice tight with anxiety. Zorak looked up at the tactical display. The Fortune's Fury's weapons were powered up, ready to unleash their devastating power. He knew they had no chance of surviving unless they took the fight straight to them. 5 seconds. Kira shouted from the comm station, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Brace yourselves, everyone." Zorak didn't wait for the final countdown. He slammed his fist down on the command panel. Fire. The Destiny's Fury's remaining weapons erupted in a burst of bright energy, streaking through space toward the Fortune's Fury's engines. The human ship's shields flickered as the shots landed, but they didn't break through. Zorak's heart sank, knowing that their best efforts weren't enough to cripple the ship. The Fortune's Fury was still in fighting condition. But that's when it happened. The Destiny's Fury's overloaded core detonated with a massive, blinding flash. The shockwave rippled through space, and everything in the vicinity seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. The explosion wasn't powerful enough to destroy the Fortune's fury, but it was enough to disable their weapons and shields. "Now," Zorak roared. In that instant, the crew of the Destiny's Fury surged forward, pushing every ounce of energy they had left into the ship's thrusters. They were on a collision course with the Fortune's fury, and there was no turning back. It was do or die. The Fortune's fury tried to maneuver, but it was too late. The Destiny's fury collided with it, sending a shockwave through both ships. The impact knocked out their remaining shields, and the human warship staggered. Zorak's heart raced. The Destiny's fury was still intact, but barely. The last of their power was drained, and the Fortune's fury was in worse shape than anyone had expected. "We've got them," Kira shouted, her voice filled with exhilaration. But Zorak wasn't celebrating yet. The battle wasn't over. The human crew on the Fortune's fury wasn't going down easily. They had to finish it. "Boarding teams, get ready," Zorak barked. "We're taking the Fortune's fury from the inside." The crew didn't need any more orders. They were ready. They had been waiting for this moment. Zorak had proven that no one, no matter how advanced or powerful, could just trample over them. They had made their stand, and now they would take the fight to the humans. With a final roar of engines, the boarding teams launched from the Destiny's Fury, their pods firing toward the Fortune's fury. Zorak watched as they rocketed through the airlock, knowing that every life on his ship was on the line. He didn't know if they would succeed, or if this would be their last fight. But one thing was certain: the Destiny's Fury would not go down quietly. They had been underestimated, dismissed as a scrap of metal drifting in the void. But now they had proven their worth. And as the boarding pods crashed into the Fortune's fury, Zorak couldn't help but feel a smirk tug at the corners of his mouth. It was a smile that carried with it all the pride of a captain who had led his crew through impossible odds, and a promise to the galaxy that the human warship had just met its match. The battle was far from over, but they had already won.